All right. Welcome back. Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Good. It's going pretty good.
Well, this week we will be talking to Mark Russell. He is actually tomorrow his Fantastic Four life story comes out. Um, this will be the third time that I've talked. Well, fourth time that I talked to him. Fourth time that, or fourth time talked to him four times. Three times recorded.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and bring Mark in and find out about the story. Hey, Mark, how's it going?
Good, good. How about you?
Oh, not too bad. I think last time we talked, we chatted about the second installment of Second Coming. So, and I think at that time you would also had written the Captain America story from Marvel, and now you have Fantastic Four life story coming out tomorrow. And so that's why we're here, and we'd like to talk to you about.
Yeah, no, that's great. It seems like a long time because I wrote most of this last summer,
Oh, wow.
so it's great to see it finally like hitting the shelves, like not having to like sort of keep this in the dark matter of my brain for so long, and allowing it to like sort of exist in the universe.
So before we get started, tell us a little bit about your experience with the Fantastic Four. Maybe do you remember the first issue that you read, or how you got introduced to them?
Yeah, I mean, this is a clue to how old I am. When I was a kid, they used to sell them on the spinner racks at like grocery stores and stuff. So that was kind of my first introduction. And I think the thing that drew me into the Fantastic Four was just how different everybody was. They had a guy made completely out of rocks, and then another guy who was like on fire. And so it's like the kind of thing where you see this on a cover, and there's another guy stretching and a woman turning invisible, and you think, I've got to know how we got to this point. I gotta know what brought this horror to be. So yeah, they're just sort of immediately they got that hook where you're meeting characters the first time you see the cover and them on the cover and their powers. You're meeting characters and you know something has gone horribly wrong in their lives, and you need to read to find out what. And I like that. To me, that's always been the hook that sort of like got me into the Fantastic Four. Is like, what's the underlying tragedy that made Johnny Storm into a guy who just turns it, who just bursts into flames, or you know, and really, I think that's what the story, what makes it work, what gives it such longevity, is that they are these, celebrities, and they have these enormous powers, and they save the world like hundreds of times, but it's all kind of born of this personal tragedy that they shared together.
And do you have a favorite story aside from the one you just wrote of the Fantastic Four?
Yeah, I think my favorite is one that I actually sort of built the first issue around. It's I forget what it was, issue 51, I think, or yeah, but it's about this guy, the scientist, who discovers a way to give Ben his human life back and taking on the powers of the thing himself. And so he offers Ben this sort of Faustian bargain where he can become Ben Grimm again, and he will himself take on the powers of the thing. And it's about the sort of moral dilemma of like Ben, choosing to accept the tragedy that's made him what he is, or choosing a more superficial but perhaps more enjoyable existence as his old self.
So we get the comic book stuff. Tell us a little bit about the team that you're working with on the book.
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit. What was the question?
Can you tell us a little bit about the creative team?
Yeah. The artist Sean Izaksa, I think that's how you pronounce his name. I've only ever corresponded him with email, so I hope I'm not butchering his name. But he's been great to work with, and one of the conversations we had was about Galactus, because Galactus is sort of the underpinning theme, or the underpinning sort of like glue of each issue. They all are in some way related to the impending arrival of Galactus. So it was very important, I think, that we get him right more than anyone else. And I told him I wanted to be more like present more like a force of nature or like an impending tsunami or disaster than an actual character. And I think Sean just immediately got that right, and I think drew the most terrifying Galactus I've ever seen. As a reference, I actually gave him Francis Bacon's painting, Portrait of Pope Gregory the 10th, and I think that was like a good sort of signpost for him. He really sort of nailed that like sort of interiorized terror that Galactus brings with him. So yeah, it's been really good working with him. He's a guy who obviously has a lot of experience in the Fantastic Four, but I think he really brings a lot to the emotional lives of the characters as well.
Yeah, compared to like other series or stories, how much time did this one take to plot? Like, kind of versus just because I would have imagined this one is you have to kind of figure out what's happening in what era or things like that.
Yeah, a lot of it was, kind of figuring out what the historic things I wanted to talk about in each issue were. And so a lot of the plot was built around how the Fantastic Four interact with history and how history has sort of interacted with them. So for like the first issue, I knew I wanted that to be about the space race primarily because it was like a thing that sort of preoccupied our country in the 1960s, and it's also like the genesis of their story. It's about them going on an ill-fated space mission. So I knew I wanted to build around that for the first issue. And then the 70s, I wanted to be more around like the social movements, like the ERA and the in the movement of like third world nations to sort of shed off the vestiges of imperialism. So like King T'Challa becomes like a big figure in the second one. And then the 80s was more about like the Cold War, the nuclear standoff between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, and like the Star Wars initiative, and sort of the growing sort of isolationist conservatism of the United States. So in a lot of ways, the history sort of like informs the plot of each issue. But it did take a long time because I wanted to also tell what you would recognize as a Fantastic Four story. It's not just like a history textbook where Mr. Fantastic shows up for 5 minutes. And so I really tried to weave the history into their actual lives. And most of the big familiar villains from the Fantastic Four show up, like Doctor Doom and Silver Surfer. And, so they are ultimately Fantastic Four history stories, but with history interwoven into them.
Did you end up talking to Chip Zdarsky at all to confirm?
Not really. I didn't. I didn't want to waste his time. But I did read the Spider-Man life story and loved what he did with it. And I think my biggest takeaway from Spider-Man life story was how he let the passage of time sort of dictate the pacing. Like he didn't try to like force everything to these sort of traditional, paced stories. He had just allowed stories to sort of occupy the years that the comics represented, the progression of time. And so I tried to do the same with Fantastic Four, and that's really sort of the only commonality. I didn't try to like build into his continuity or anything. I just tried to like allow that to be sort of the sensibility where you're just like time is passing and these people are on the roller coaster of time whether they like it or not.
So is there, like a favorite part that you wrote about, maybe a favorite decade that that the story takes place in?
I think my favorite one, probably the most gratifying one to write, was the 2000s, which is strange because it doesn't really feel like history to me. I'm old enough that feels like a week ago. But I think it's because it's the one that's least about history sort of acting on the Fantastic Four and more about the Fantastic Four acting on history. It's where we see them changing the world dramatically because of who they are and because of the culmination of all they've been through in the preceding decades. In a lot of ways, it's the climax of the story.
And did you find any of the characters easier to write or harder to write?
The one that's kind of, I think, the hardest to write is Ben, because he writes in this very specific sort of patois, this sort of like Brooklyn sort of tough guy speak, which is really fun once you get the hang of it, but it's kind of hard to learn. And plus, you feel like every time he says something, it's got to be like, a banger. Every time he says something, it's got to be like a quotable line, because he's just that kind of character who, he doesn't talk unless it's really important. And then he said something that none of the other characters would have said. So he's at once the hardest and the most fun to write.
Mike, do you have anything that?
Let me see. We kind of, I was gonna, just like the idea of trying to condense like all of the Fantastic Four history into 6 issues sounds so incredibly daunting. So you have to pick and choose which are, the big moments.
Right. And for me, the key was to not try to like make it about the history of the Fantastic Four. I tried not to make it like, or this homage to all the series and stuff that have come before, because that one, people have already read those.
We just did the history of the Marvel Universe last year.
Yeah, I tried. It's not like, and I love what Ed Piskor did with the X-Men Grand Design.
Oh yeah.
But it's not like that. It's not like where I'm trying to condense the official history of the Fantastic Four into an encyclopedic entry. I'm more telling my own story about the Fantastic Four that takes place over the last 60 years.
Now, having written this series, is there any other Marvel characters that you would like to give the same treatment to?
I think it would be really good to do like a Howard the Duck series over the decades. Howard the Duck life story.
I could see that being a lot of fun.
Yeah, especially I think if you made him like sort of like somehow involved in politics, you could do like almost like a Cerebus, like a non-misogynistic Cerebus of Howard the Duck implicating himself in the American political landscape since like 1968 or something.
Was there anything that you wanted to, like any historical moments that you wanted to include that just weren't able to fit in?
Yeah, the one that I thought like, oh, I've got to do something about this, but it just never really fit in with the plot was Watergate. Like I really want to do something with Watergate in the 70s because it's such a watershed moment in American history. But it really didn't fit in with the story I wanted to tell about the 70s. And one of the things I do with this series is that each issue is narrated by a different character. And the 70s issue is narrated by Sue Storm. So it was really more about her journey and her role in the Fantastic Four and how she felt like she was being marginalized at the same time when like women were demanding equal rights, and the Equal Rights Amendment was like a big thing and she wanted to march with that, but at the same time she had a kid she had to take care of, and Reed was busy preparing for the arrival of Galactus. So it really just never got a chance to sort of squeeze itself into the story.
And we'll look for that in the omnibus.
Yeah, right.
So, is there anything else in particular about the series that you'd like to mention before we kind of move on?
Yeah, I think that it is a real personal work for me too. It's a lot about my own personal meditations about what gives our lives meaning and how we find family and the people around us, and that family is ultimately the people who stick around to help you through pick up the pieces from the tragedies of life. And so I hope people read it not just hoping to see some like superhero battles, but also as actually as like something that is a personal story from me to them and from Sean as well.
Well, I know that all everything else that I've written, you've you've written that I've read, also has is very layered, and I expect that from this too.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Well, hopefully you don't find it off-putting.
A man made of rocks. That can't work. That'll never work.
So, Mike, do you have any more questions about the Fantastic Four?
You've kind of answered all my weird questions.
So you were also part of the future state that DC Comics did, and you wrote the Imperious Lex for Superman. I just want to say I think you should, since the Joker got his own series, you should write a Lex Luthor series.
I would love to write a Lex Luthor series. Lex Luthor is probably my favorite character in the DC universe to write, because I feel like he's sort of the id of the entire universe. He's the guy who can get away with saying exactly what he thinks, and what he thinks is awful.
He's like,
okay, Mike.
No, I apologize. My dog is flipping out. I don't know if I can hear that. But what I liked about the Superman versus Imperious Lex was just I felt like it had a very like Silver Age kind of quality to it that I found very endearing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it has. It's based on a Silver Age story, actually.
Yeah.
The story of Lexor comes from the Silver Age. Although the original story was about Lex Luthor finding a planet where the odds would be even between him and Superman, so he could sort of challenge Superman to like a schoolyard fight on this planet, which I thought was kind of silly. It would really be kind of a waste of Lex Luthor's talent. Like if he were to go to like this planet, he wouldn't just like want to win a fist fight. He'd want to fulfill all the ambitions he had on Earth, which Superman had always thwarted. This is like in a lot of ways what is happening on Lexor when Superman arrives is what would have been happening on Earth had Superman never come to Earth. Lex Luthor would have eventually taken over, controlled everyone with a propaganda network, and basically made himself dictator for life of the entire planet.
Reading it, I got the feeling that you were perhaps saying something about the previous administration, which I enjoyed.
Yeah, it's hard. As a writer, you might think, oh, I don't want to write something topical. I don't want to write something about now, but it's hard not to, because you are sort of the culmination of everything that's infected you over your life. And it's hard to just tell a straightforward story without letting nuances, letting metaphors come out about the things that are really eating you alive. And so, yeah, in a way, I think everything I've written in the last 4 years has in some way, direct or indirectly, been about the previous administration, because I felt like, we were basically a jump ball about whether or not we were going to become a fascist country. And, the ball, in my opinion, is still in the air. See how it drops.
No, I agree. So, what was it like working in, like, let's call it the future state sandbox? I mean, I don't know if you can say how, the parameters that DC gave you, or...
Yeah, was this a story you were shopping to them, or did they come to you, or?
They came to me with this, and with the story, like, we want to do a story about Lexor, and that was basically the direction they gave me, about Lex Luthor taking over Lexor.
That sounds pretty fun.
And the other sort of like direction they gave me is like, which is really strange to me, but this is what they wanted. They said, we want like some sort of metaphor about Brexit. So I built the story around that idea that there had to be some sort of Brexit metaphor where, the Lexor is leaving the United Planets or some other organization to their own detriment. So I built the rest of the story around that. But I also, like I said, being infected by things that are happening in my life as I'm writing, also wrote it about like misinformation and propaganda, and also a COVID metaphor, which the reticulates end up sort of representing when they come back to Lexor, and everyone has to sort of deny it's happening because they don't want to look bad. But meanwhile, you're telling people there's no robot invasion of Lexor, while the robots are ripping the roof off your house and devouring devouring your husband in the living room.
So, I mean, this wasn't the first time you wrote Lex Luthor. I mean, you wrote. Am I right that you wrote the Porky Pig Lex?
Yeah, no, that's me.
I enjoyed it.
I also enjoyed it.
No, I'm very proud of it. I think it was a good story. I think people it got a lot of attention because the cover was described by more than one person as nightmare fuel, because it has this really sort of probably tragically realistic Porky Pig on it, getting a haircut from Lex Luthor. But yeah, no, I'm very happy with that story, and I think that in a lot of ways, the thing I like about these goofy crossovers is kind of the same thing I like about things like the Future State, which is like it's a chance to not get bogged down in continuity and the canon of other writers and what they've done, and tell a fresh story that springs completely from your own experience and imagination.
Yeah, like Superman playing diplomat out in space, and it's not that he couldn't do that, but that's just not what those books are doing, and it's just nice to see. Yeah, there was the other thing I thought that made it very like Silver Age is like, hey, we're just on like a crazy, like we're not even really gonna go to Earth that like we're all the time on Lexor. It was just a lot of fun, very different from especially what's been going on in Superman for I feel like the last few years.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, I think one thing that was like maybe different about Superman versus Imperious Lex is that Superman's kind of wrong-footed the entire story. Like he never really gets a chance to be, until maybe the very end, he never really gets a chance to be Superman. He is like sort of backseated by Lois Lane, who's the official representative from the United Planets. When he goes to Lexor, he's just kind of there as her accompaniment. And then when he is on Lexor, he's wrong-footed by the Red Sun. He has to act quickly because the powers of the Red Sun are making him weak the second he steps on the planet's surface. And to compound that, everyone hates him because they have been told all these lies about him by Lex News, Lex Luthor's propaganda network. So it's everything that he's not used to. Everyone hating him being a pariah, him not having his powers, and him not being the center of attention. And yet I think what that does is it allows the thing that I've always found interesting about Superman to kind of come to the fore, which is like his compassion, his empathy for people.
Yeah, seeing like the.
So go ahead.
No, just like like I mean, like the moment when it's like there was like he saved me.
Yeah,
and it's moments like that. It would, I mean, you all just saw that, right?
you hope that this is like the ultimate undoing of any sort of like propaganda, that there comes a moment where people realize that what they're seeing with their eyes is different than what they're being told, and hopefully they choose to go with their eyes.
And I appreciate the restraint and never like having Lex take off his skin face.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't do that to you. Well, I would, but not in the context of that story.
Yeah, I found that to be kind of creepy, but it worked. So, do you have anything upcoming, let's say, with like Ahoy Comics? Because
yeah, I got a lot of stuff. On the stove right now. I've got Second Coming. The second volume is coming out. Issue number 3 comes out in June. So we're doing a second volume of that. I also have another series with Ahoy that hasn't been announced yet, which I'm co-writing with a friend of mine, Bryce Ingman, who I also co-wrote Killing Red Sonja with. So I'm excited about that. I've also got Not All Robots with AWA, which was just recently announced, which is a future in which robots have all the jobs. So they make this work by assigning every house a robot that will be basically their breadwinner, their means of support, which creates like a ton of resentment between the robots and their human families.
Oh, just a nice family story, not political at all.
Yeah. And yeah, I've got some other series which haven't been announced yet, which are coming out from other publishers. One I'm told is going. It's already been announced. I'm doing a series with Vault, but not much has been said specifically about it. But I hear they're going to do their big announcement tomorrow.
Oh, nice. We'll have to wait and see that. So I would also like to just agree that with you that driving an ice cream truck is probably the worst job there is.
Oh God, can you imagine listening to that music like over and over?
I've never even thought about that till just now. The idea that they have to listen to it nonstop. Oh
yeah, the reason why I tweeted that was because I was sitting on my deck working and I couldn't work because an ice cream truck had parked across the street. And it was only there for like maybe 3 or 4 minutes, but it drove me to madness. And I thought, that poor driver who's in that truck, this is what they're listening to for like 6 or 7 hours. And I couldn't even concentrate. I had to like do a deep cleanse after that, like just from being exposed to over 3 or 4 minutes. It's like I would have to invest in some like heavy duty earplugs, I think, to drive an ice cream truck.
You're gonna get art back from the artist. Be like, why did I write everyone eating ice cream?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was oppressive.
Oh, it goes around our neighborhood. It plays music, then it goes, hello.
Oh,
It's like,
that sounds like some Resident Evil stuff right there.
Yeah. At least it doesn't play like the screams of children or something in between songs.
And now my 4.5-year-old has realized what that music means, and oops, sorry,
it's all over.
You're going to bed now.
Oh my.
Yeah. Oh, I remember, like, in our house, I always created like this panic. It was almost like a tornado or something, warning, where all of a sudden you hear the ice cream truck in the distance, and so you get excited and you have to run to your coin jar and try to pick out the quarters, and do it before the truck gets down the street. And then you have to like go out and run and wave your hand in the air to with your money to stop it. It was like a race against time. It was like the closest thing I think. A kid experiences to like your wife's water breaking and having to race her to the hospital.
I just remember last year when it first came out, when it started going around, it was probably about April or May, and I just thought, great, COVID on wheels. That's all.
Yeah.
See, we always hear it, but they never come to our street. So my wife is just perpetually just like,
yeah.
You live on a dead end.
I know.
That's like the worst of both worlds. You didn't even get any ice cream.
Exactly. It's like you get the Pavlovian response of like, well, now I want ice cream, but he's never going to show up.
I had some ice cream truck when you were.
Oh, you're breaking up big time.
I can hear a word of that.
So, can you hear me now?
His image inducer is wearing off.
Yeah, that was better.
That's.
I was just going to say, the last time I had something from an ice cream truck was years ago, Mike, when you were over for my birthday celebration, and you bought me the SpongeBob.
I was just going to say.
Oh, the SpongeBob popsicle.
Popsicle.
That was recently in the news.
Oh, it was in the news.
Huh? Yeah, it causes brain cancer.
Oh, sorry, Chad.
I'm kidding. It doesn't cause brain cancer. No, there was a story about a kid who, ordered some online because that was his favorite treat, but he apparently screwed up on the decimals or something, and he ended up ordering like $5,000 worth of popsicles, which his mom then couldn't return because they're popsicles and they're melted. So they then had to have like a GoFundMe to weather this what would have been a catastrophic financial
emergency block party. Everyone get over
put
here.
As many as we could in the freezer, but our freezer's not that big.
Oh my goodness!
But I'm glad everything turned out okay for them. But they were not. I mean, what a statement! I mean, almost that's like satire writing itself, where like a family's financial well-being is destroyed by a popsicle order.
No one ever expects the popsicles.
Yeah, if Dickens had written that story, then they would have gone into debt, and then the debt collectors would have hounded them, and then they would have ended up taking the house, and the mother would end up dying of pneumonia.
There's your next story.
Yeah.
for the next volume of Edgar Allan's.
Maybe for Billionaire Island, maybe for the second volume of Billionaire Island, we'll have somebody die as a result of popsicle-induced debt.
It just sounds like if you were in jail, that'd be like a long conversation. So why are you here? Popsicles.
Yeah, I owed the wrong people money.
Yeah.
The wrong people being, Popsicle, a SpongeBob SquarePants Popsicle company. But think about this is one thing I think about a lot when you see these heartwarming stories on Twitter of people being saved by GoFundMes and Kickstarters and stuff. It's like, if it weren't for these sort of acts of anonymous generosity, and how many lives would just be destroyed by something small. And not only that, but it's like, for every person you're reading about who their fate is saved by a GoFundMe or something, there's probably 100 people out there who aren't as lucky, who either they're not getting the publicity, or they don't have as many friends, or for whatever reason they just sort of quietly vanish into the black hole of debt and ruination that these other people we hear about are being saved from.
Yeah.
Well,
on that note,
but yes.
So
I agree.
So where can people find you on social media, and tell us, kind of give a final pitch for the book?
Or ice cream bar recommendations.
Yeah. Well, I love the drumstick ice creams, the little self-contained ice cream cones, mostly because of the consistency the cone takes when you get down to the cone. It's like this rubbery, it's just, I don't know, it's so good, it's so chewy. But in terms of social media, the best place is probably Twitter. They can find me at Manruss, MANRUSS. And it's also my handle for Instagram, although Instagram seems to be mostly pictures of the neighborhood squirrels, my cat. But if you're more interested in the comics than my neighborhood fauna, then I recommend Twitter.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time today to talk with us, and hopefully we'll see you at a show sometime.
Yeah. No, I'm planning on coming to Emerald City Comic-Con in December. It's going to be my post-COVID debutante party. So if you're coming to Emerald City in December, I'll see you there.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and we'll definitely check out Fantastic Four Life Story and everything else you've got coming out. And
right.
Well, when we find out more about that, we'd love to have you back on.
Yeah, anytime. This is a pleasure as always.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.